We've got a piece of Mercury drag racing history on today's show. Drag racing was extremely popular in the 1960s, and the automakers capitalized on the hype of classes like Superstock to try and sell new cars. Superstock was an NHRA drag racing class, and the cars were made from factory-installed parts that ran much harder than the consumer versions, but looked like stock new cars. The next evolution was FX, or factory experimental cars, and these were still built with the factory original parts, but in configurations that were not available for sale to the general public. FX cars often featured big engines from larger cars or station wagons, and they were shoehorned into smaller platforms, just like our 1964 Mercury that we see here. The factory experimental program kind of grew out of Superstock racing, and Superstock were cars that were built with parts that you could buy at your local dealership, but the FX stuff were one-off custom factory-made race car-only parts, like this whole lightweight front end consisting of fiberglass fenders, a fiberglass hood, and a fiberglass bumper. The biggest engine you could get in a 64 Mercury Comet was a 271 horsepower Super 289. It was very similar to the K-Code 289 that Ford offered in the Fairlane, and the Fairlane and the Mercury Comet were a similar platform, so oftentimes they shared similar drivelines. The 289 car was a hot performer. In fact, Mercury actually called it the Comet Caliente, which meant hot. But Mercury built a handful of Comets with a 425 horsepower dual quad 427 and a whole bunch of other special parts to really make waves in FX racing. It's hard to win races unless you've got a powerful plant, and hiding underneath all of this air intake hose and this airbox plenum is a high-rise dual-quad Super Marauder Mercury 427 engine. It makes over 425 horsepower, and it's bolted up to an aluminum case 4-speed manual trans, and then you've got a locking rear end and back, and all of that combined to push this little car deep into the 11s in the quarter mile. There were two batches of A-Class FX cars built, 10 in December of 1963 and another 10 in the spring of '64, and one station wagon, making a total of 21 Mercury AFX cars. This car was built in the first batch and sold to Dean Hook Motors in Newport, Arkansas, and it was named the Hemi Hunter. These Mercs were driven by some pretty big names in drag racing, like Ronnie Socks, and Dyno Don Nicholson, so you know that the 427 was a monster. But an AFX car was more than just a big engine stuffed in a small car. There was a whole list of parts that were different or special and unique to the factory experimental program. For example, this car has a fiberglass teardrop hood, it has fiberglass fenders and fiberglass bumper in the front. The weight reduction program wasn't limited to the exterior. Inside the car, they used a pair of lightweight Ford van seats. There's no sound deadener, seam sealer, or heat insulation under the thin carpet. The dashboard doesn't have anything the car doesn't need to go down the drag strip. There's no radio, there's no heater or air conditioner, just a set of gauges hanging below, a Ford Rotunda tachometer on the dash, a steering wheel, and a 4-speed handle. On the performance side, you've got this 10.25-to-1 compression 427 with a high-rise dual quad intake manifold. It's got a pair of high-riser cylinder heads. It's got an RC bell housing. The 4-barrel carburetors are special. It's got a Hirsch shifter, and it's got a special bonnet for the carburetors designed to duct fresh cold air in, maximizing every possible advantage they could get to make this car go fast. It's pretty surprising to see that this car has survived as nice as it is. Now, it's got a very nice restoration, so it was brought back to its brand new condition, but a lot of these AFX cars were raced and raced hard, and there was only 21 of them, so I'm gathering that probably all of them saw drag strip duty at some point. A popular thing to do back then was to take these cars and evolve them to the next level, which was an altered wheelbase, or even some of the early funny car tricks like a whole fiberglass tilt front end and fiberglass doors and plexiglass windows, and pretty soon they just kind of cut and gutted these cars to be lighter and lighter and lighter. So to see one that still remains intact with all of its factory original experimental pieces in place is really kind of a neat thing. This car is wearing kind of a plain Jane vanilla white paint job, and although it doesn't look very racy, these cars provided a very nice canvas for Mercury dealers to be lettered up on the side and other sponsor names and decals and paint jobs to make them unique, but this one rolled out of the factory just wearing plain white. So whether you like bone stock muscle cars or racers like this AFX car, we've got something for everybody on Muscle Car of the Week. And if you don't believe me, check out our website at musclecaroftheweek.com. We'll see you there.